Hello, I'm Maria O'Connor, and I was asked to take part in this lovely project on Irish crochet lace, Clondalkin's Tangible Threads. And where I come into it is I was brought up in this house, and my grandmother was born in this house. My grandmother was Mrs. Mary O'Connor, born in 1889, and she had a sister called Georgina. And Georgina lived just up the road in Sally Park Cottage, and she had two little girls and passed away quite young. So they were great women, they were great with their hands. When Georgina passed away, my grandmother was very close with the girls, and as it happened, both those girls lost their husbands quite young as well. So Patricia Gray was her married name, Patricia Gray. She joined Sybil Connolly's atelier in Dublin, making couture gowns. She was great at sewing. So after a while, her sister May joined Sybil Connolly, and they both worked there together. So my understanding, and other people will tell you more of the story better than I can, was that Patricia was more or less a foreman, and she ran the cutting room and made the beautiful clothes. And May, I believe her son told me, did a little bit of travelling in Europe, finding crochet lace patterns, I think in convents and places like that, or from older ladies. And she would bring it to Sybil, and they'd decide what they wanted to do, where they wanted to go with it. So they recruited women locally in Clondalkin. So she recruited her auntie, Mary O'Connor, my grandmother, and she recruited a lady called Mrs. Lyons, and they taught the other ladies in the village, and they had a little network of crochet lace makers. So when Sybil wanted a piece, the ladies would be given a piece of work by May Byrne, and they would do it in piecework. I remember my grandmother making the crochet in this house. So when I was small, I would go in to see how my grandmother was, and she would be making crochet lace, unhappily making black lace or happily making white lace, depending on how it was going. And she would say, hands, and I'd have to do that. And she'd say, over, and I'd have to do that. And then I was allowed to touch it. I remember her making rose patterns, and I remember her making little square black lace patterns. So they worked very hard at it. They were raising children as well. They were fantastic women. So they would make the piecework. There was sort of a main cohort of ladies who did it. May got Mrs. Lyons, my grandmother, Mrs. Freeman, I believe, who lived in the house on the corner here. Latterly, my mother, Josie O'Connor, her daughter, Molly Brennan, and Mrs. Matthews, who lived in the room next door, as it happens. So they would make the pieces, and they would be taken away, and May would put them together in Sybil Connolly's. She and Tricia would work on the gowns together. So that was their story. There were lots of other women who would help out. I know members of the Lyons family, a member of my own family. May's son Davy told me a lady called Mrs. Quinlan on the next road used to make lace, and the neighbours. And Patricia will tell you later that the children were drafted in when things were really busy, and they would be sat around and May would call out the pattern to them. So I hope we'll be able to share with you. Actually, I have a handwritten pattern that my grandmother did, a double rose pattern for Sybil Connolly. And you can tell by the pattern that it was called out. It wasn't from, you know, a Sirdar pattern or anything like that. It was called out. And I tried to go with it myself, and I failed miserably the first time. But the second time I did manage to do it by sort of filling in the gaps in the directions. So that was the story. Really, it's a very simple story of powerful women doing that and helping each other and teaching each other.
Well, my name is Patricia Nutty. My mother was Patricia Gray from Clondalkin. She was originally a power, and she was widowed at the age of 30 with 4 young children, so she had to go out to work, and she started to work for Sybil Connolly, and she ran Sybil Connolly's workrooms, and she was her chief cutter and pattern maker and everything. And then Sybil was a great designer and great with colour, and Sybil wanted crochet dresses. So Mommy knew Aunt May could crochet. Aunt May was her sister, and Aunt May then started the crochet in Clondalkin. So my aunt would then make patterns. She'd make maybe 4 or 5 different patterns, and Mommy would bring them into Sybil into work, and then Sybil would choose what pattern she wanted the dress, and then she taught all the women how to do the crochet. The patterns were never formally written down. They were handed on verbally, and May did, teaching us how to do it. And but we never had a written pattern. In fact, I couldn't understand a written pattern now if I saw it, you know, so that's the way she did it. And May would we'd sit with her and she'd just tell us to do a chain, join the chain, do a double treble, and that's the way she taught us. She never wrote a pattern down, that I ever saw anyway, you know. She just made them up and then taught everybody what Sybil wanted. And then the patterns would go in. Mostly I remember white and black crochet, but I believe my Aunt May used to dye them in tea, the white, if they wanted the white colour to go down. So it just went on like that for years, I think from the early 1950s till late into maybe 65, 66 for the crochet to go on. And there was women from Clondalkin, Drimna, Swords, we had somebody, lots and lots of women that I don't even remember because I was young when it started. And Aunt May taught them all to, they probably knew how to crochet, but she showed them the patterns and what Sybil wanted. So that's how it all started, and it probably finished around the, maybe 66 or something, you know. Sybil stopped doing a lot of dress shows and that, you know. The dress shows when we were in Richard Allen's, there was the workrooms were upstairs, and what they did, the models now, it's not like nowadays where they race along. They came very slowly with the dresses, and the most important people were upstairs. They were the first ones to see the dresses coming, and then there was a beautiful staircase in it, and they'd walk down the staircase and then they walked up and down, the people. So we had a little spot behind the staircase. That's where we used to go as children to look at the dress shows, yeah. They were lovely. It was the first time I ever saw it. There was a bathroom in it with a big bath full of champagne. The bath, you know. Never seen that before, yeah. Now, when Sybil moved from Richard Allen's, she broke away from the company in Richard Allen's and she went to 71 Merrion Square. And her room there that her customers would come to, it was a pleated linen walls, and then the pleated linen was joined with crochet. So it was beautiful. The walls were white pleated linen with white crochet strips down, as in the picture there. Yeah, it was beautiful now. Now, my mother left Sybil's, I think in the 60s, and started out on her own, and some of Sybil's customers came along to Mommy, and one of them was Mrs. Childers, and she made Mrs. Childers' dress for the inauguration when he was president, and that dress is in the museum in Collins's Barracks. And there's also a dress beside it, a pleated linen from Sybil. Both Mommy's name is on her dress and Sybil, but Mommy would have been making the other dress as well. But Sybil was a great designer, you know. I don't ever remember learning how to crochet. It seemed to be always in the house, in Aunt May's house, and you'd see her doing either knitting or crochet in the morning times. And then when she started to do it for Sybil, it just seemed to come natural to us. She'd just tell us what to do and we'd do it, you know, as children. When I moved up to Newlands, my friend Bridget Brown, as she was then, she did the crochet. My cousins did the crochet. And then, as my cousin Aunt May's daughter would say, when you wanted anything, a new coat or a jumper or anything, you crochet the money to get the money to buy the your dress or your coat or whatever. And then when I got married, I crocheted for money to buy these special knives and forks and spoons, which I still have at home, and just to get the extra money to buy extra things. And that's what a lot of us young people, and probably the women, did to get extra bits and pieces. We'd do the crochet to get the money to buy things.
I'm Bridget Brown. I met Patricia Gray after school and we used to do our crochet then. That's what we did for pocket money with her Aunt May. Can I say how much we got? 2 and 6 for 12 roses. And that was a lot of money to us then. So we were able to get our little bits and pieces in town when we go into shopping. On a Tuesday, we went in shopping. I used to love, actually, when we'd go down to the house, when we'd have a new pattern and all of the ladies would be there. They're older ladies. And Trish and I were the youngest, actually, in that group. And Mrs. Byrne, Auntie May, she was a lovely woman. She'd have the patterns ready for us and show us how to do them. And also, Trish's mum was beautiful.
So I do have memories of the ladies doing the crochet. I was quite small when it was happening. I remember my mother being drafted in when they were busy. And I have a lovely photograph of my grandmother and my Auntie Molly furiously crocheting downstairs in this house for Sybil Connolly. And when there was a big project on, or a special gown, anecdotally, some people in the Lyons family remember actually this pattern being made. So I have a photograph of some crochet work that my grandmother did, and it's this exact pattern. It's the very first time we've been able to get a concrete proof that something she worked on was actually in a Sybil Connolly gown. I mean, we knew it, but knowing it and seeing it is two different things. So it's lovely that all those ladies, there actually is a tangible thread to the story of the dress and the story of the lace. So the work that was done on the crochet, apart from the wonderful creativity, it would have had real tangible importance to the ladies and to their families. I think I mentioned earlier, many of them were widowed young. So they were faced with bringing up young families and sometimes big families alone. They had done it through tough times in the 40s. And I'm sure that, I believe from the 50s to the 70s, when the piecework was being done for Sybil Connolly, it meant a tremendous amount to them. I know they didn't get paid a tremendous amount for it, but what they did get meant a lot to them. I'm sure it was the same for the neighbours too. They were all keen to help. Well, they were keen to help because they all respected May and Tricia and my grandmother, but they were also keen to help because, of course, it was a source of income for them. So it was very important in Clondalkin village for those women. But also there was a tremendous sense of pride and recognition for what they were doing, which sometimes I think in the women's history gets left out or maybe not reflected as much on. So I think it's a lovely thing that they were involved in this art that created something good for their family financially, economically, but it also gave them a sense of pride in themselves and the work they were doing, which of course as married women, you know, in those days they wouldn't have been working, or as widowed women they would have been bringing up families. So they were tremendous to do what they did, and the way they did it. Really proud of them.